Recently, my guy, Mchunu, the head of police, is finally saying he's coming for Mchunu. Masibiyoze, guys, halala. I had to pay Mchunu a lot of money.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
And I'm giving him a BMW and I'm paying for the 3 prostitutes. But the reason I get them to investigate Mchunu is because I'm telling them you are next, you know? Mchunu, he's not stopping.
Oh, that's just the Hawks and several policemen outside your home looking to confiscate your cell phone for simply creating a satirical TikTok video about the now suspended police minister.
He said there were 2 Hawks officials. He thinks there were about 11 in total from the CCTV footage that he saw. And I mean, there was this classic throwaway line from him, which was to the effect that, you know, as far as he understood it, it took 6 guys to take down Osama bin Laden. But, you know, there were 11 officers sent to his house for his cell phone in circumstances when he wasn't actually there, which again sort of raises questions around the competence of this entire thing.
This is exactly what happened to social media comedian Anton Taylor, with specialist legal journalist Karen Morn breaking down every detail of this truly bizarre story next. Later in the show, the membership of the ANC in the Eastern Cape is in sharp decline. And finally, the son of a Norwegian princess could face 10 years behind bars if found guilty of rape.
Got something to say about this topic? Drop us a short voice note on the Leeds WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179.
Thanks so much for listening to The Lead, now more than 500,000 times. Please rate us 5 stars, hit like and subscribe, follow on Apple, Spotify and YouTube to stay tuned for our next episode. My name's Graham Robenheimer, this is The Lead, and this is the South African story. Well, it's a story so out of left field and certainly not one we had on our bingo card in 2025. The Hawks, our supposedly elite crime-fighting unit, which is currently severely underpowered, has come out in strong defense of its investigation of fairly well-known local social media content creator Anton Taylor. Well, the story broken by a specialist legal journalist, Karen Morn, last week revealed that Taylor, after posting a satirical video of suspended police minister Mchunu this year, had attracted a full-blown Hawks probe and even a raid on his home, with officers hell-bent on gaining access to his cell phone. Now, in this TikTok video, Taylor essentially pretends to be a criminal who's bribing the minister with sex workers and a BMW. Now, the comedian says it follows news that at the time, Mchunu, although later it came to light that it wasn't the minister, had asked police watchdog IPID to probe KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Nevertheless, Mchunu was not happy with Taylor's video, satire or not, and thought at the time that Anton was a journalist of sorts, enough to open a case against him, which has since failed to reach the courts for prosecution. Morn, meanwhile, is with me from our Johannesburg studios to help us understand this, well, truly bizarre story. Karen, thanks so much. Welcome back to The Lead. Lucky to have you back on.
Thank you for having me, Graham.
Fantastic. I haven't had all my coffee this morning, so you'll sense that I'm semi-stumbling over my words. Let's take it from the top, right? And I thought, let's quickly play an excerpt of Taylor's TikTok that mentions the minister took umbrage with, if you will.
Recently, my guy, Mchunu, the head of police, is finally saying he's coming for Mchunu. Masibiyoze, guys, halala. I had to pay Mchunu a lot of money. And I'm giving him a BMW and I'm paying for the 3 prostitutes. But the reason I get them to investigate Mchunu is because I'm telling them you are next, you know? Mchunu, he's not stopping.
For those who perhaps don't like or understand satire, what was Taylor really trying to say here, Karen?
Well, I think we need to understand that this video was posted on the 29th of March this year. So this is, of course, before that bombshell press conference by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi in KZN, which was, of course, in July, the 6th of July. And really, it was at the height of this kind of suspicion about the relationship between the police minister, which of course, and Mkhwanazi, which of course is now later solidified into those very serious allegations, which have themselves prompted the instigation of, commission of inquiry. So essentially what Taylor was responding to was that report, which later denied by IPID, that, there'd been an investigation of alleged interference initiated into Mchunu by the police minister. And he's pretending to be this Eastern European criminal who's celebrating because he has, this entire criminal enterprise in KZN, and it is being thwarted by Mchunu and his cops, and his criminals are being killed by the police. And as he describes in the video, his lifestyle has had to take a knock because Mchunu is hurting his wallet, and he gives various illustrations of that. So it was really that video, towards the end where he says, that he had to essentially fund this kind of difficulty that Mchunu is facing by bribing Senzo Mchunu with the 3 sex workers and a BMW. And that was really what drew the ire of the minister.
Sure. According to Taylor, and as per your timeline of events in your reporting, it's understood that it's only around, March, April, May, June, that,
Yes.
these Hawks officials, some of whom coming from Gauteng, all the way to Taylor's home in Cape Town, knocking on his door, but Taylor's out of town, right?
Yes, he was in the United States of America. He was visiting his sister and his brother-in-law. He was on holiday, and he had called me because, of course, we'd done a big story on the comedians who were taking on the white genocide mythology with their comedy. And I'd interviewed him, and as a result, he had my number. And he phones me that night, the night of the 19th of June, in a flat-out panic because, he's heard from his building manager and people at the building that look, the Hawks have descended upon your property. CCTV footage later showing 3 vans, multiple police officials. You can imagine it's quite panic inducing. And that panic was, of course, intensified because no one knew what was actually happening and what the cops were there for. So at that stage, I just said to him, look, we were trying to sort of think about what potentially could have resulted in this, extreme raid scenario, which would normally have been employed for very serious crime. And I said to him, you need to get lawyers. You need to get lawyers, and you need to find out what's happened, and they cannot just descend on your property without a warrant, and that warrant will disclose the alleged offenses, what you're under investigation for, what they were looking for, etc. And of course, he subsequently did that. A few days later, he arrived back in the US. He was going to potentially stay longer, but with this thing hanging over his head, he came back early. And of course, then subsequently discovers in this interview with the Hawks that it's the satirical video with Mchunu that had been posted on the 29th of March that is the source of this legal difficulty that he's now facing.
What I thought so interestingly and very revealing, and this is the latest report that came out just this week, Hawks defend investigation of Mchunu's complaint against Taylor as quote-unquote crime against the state. Of course, the Hawks CATS unit, crimes against the state unit, is directly involved here. It's mind-blowing that it is. But let's continue with our timeline of events. What I thought very revealing of this particular piece, Karen, is that Taylor said, okay, the Hawks wanted his cell phone as the specific sort of chief evidence apparatus, if you will, that it needed to get inside to understand, if indeed he was the one who had published this video. Of course, you can see him in the video, of course, and, maybe they thought, whatever, AI or whatever the case may be. But he was like, hey, I'm prepared to sign an affidavit under oath admitting that I did make the video, so you don't really need to look into my cell phone anyway.
Well, I mean, I find that fascinating because there's a bit of a divergence on the versions here. So the version of the Hawks officer, who goes in Maloto, who goes and provides the affidavit to the magistrate's court to secure this warrant under somewhat questionable conditions, says that no, they needed to access evidence on the phone, and they say that, well, we need this phone to establish the video, et cetera. But when I spoke to the police minister, he made it very clear that he wanted to know who Anton Taylor was working with if there were other people involved. And I suspect that part of the reason why the phone was sought wasn't just about establishing that Taylor had actually produced this video, which he freely admitted he had. It wasn't in dispute. It's on his TikTok account. You can clearly see it's him. But was about this issue that seemed to be bothering the police minister of like, is he working with someone else? Are other people involved? You know, for Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, it was a very real thing of, you know, potential conspiracy, as he described it to me, and that possibly the reason why the phone was being sought was to check who he was in contact with. Taylor actually said to me, and we didn't have this in the story, but he said that someone had installed Truecaller on his phone as well. When he got it back, there was a number of, things had been deleted, et cetera, et cetera. So I suspect that part of the dimension of that was to identify who he was in communication with as part of the furtherance of this investigation.
I can't claim to know what he can afford, but I mean, if I was in his position, I certainly wouldn't keep the cell phone because I'd be too worried, something else nefarious might have been plopped onto it that without my sort of say-so, here's Truecaller.
Yes, well, I mean, interestingly enough that you mentioned that because he did get a data analyst, he got specialists to investigate whether there was malware or spyware on the phone. They didn't find anything like that, which is really what he was wanting. But they did find that things had been deleted and reinstalled. He, of course, had logged off all his social media accounts except for Facebook. And the police appeared to have used, or whoever was analyzing this phone had appeared to use Facebook to get into his LinkedIn, which is all very, very odd. We have no clear sense of why this was happening. But I mean, one of the bizarre aspects of this, one of the kind of heartbreakingly bizarre aspects of this is that they, got a triangulation report to find the location of the phone. I mean, these are aspects of investigation, Graham, that are utilized in very serious and violent crime when, you have someone who's accused of murdering their spouse and they're on the run and you use a triangulation report to find them. And I really have severe misgivings about the use of that kind of investigative capacity in scenarios where oftentimes it isn't utilized for far more serious cases. And I think that beneath the kind of bizarre hilarity of this entire situation, there is that kind of very serious underpinning of the serious crime situation that we have in South Africa. And the question marks about whether resources that should have been used finding serious criminals were being used against an influencer.
And to give an example, triangulation reports, in terms of my experience, were used during the Sri and Devani murder trial, specifically one of the alleged triggerman, although he was found to be later guilty, Xolile Mngeni. That was very key evidence to sort of mark how the vehicle had moved across Cape Town's highways and how they sort of ended up in Khayelitsha. And that was a very big pivotal part of that particular murder investigation, right? I glossed over something here, Karen, please excuse me. How many police officers was at Anton's home? That, I think, is also quite revealing.
Well, he said there were 2 Hawks officials. He thinks there were about 11 in total from the CCTV footage that he saw. And I mean, there was this classic throwaway line from him, which was to the effect that, as far as he understood it, it took 6 guys to take down Osama bin Laden. But, there were 11 officers sent to his house for his cell phone in circumstances when he wasn't actually there, which again sort of raises questions around the competence of this entire thing. And he said, from the interactions that the officials had with his, security people and the people at the building, they seemed very unconvinced that he wasn't there, to the point of demanding to look at his car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, the entire operation in itself, all its sound and glory, appeared to be fundamentally ill-informed by any real intelligence as to his location.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graham Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179.
This is The Lead. This is the South African story. My name's Graham Robe, and I'm in conversation with my colleague, specialist legal journalist Karen Morn, about this truly bizarre story of the Hawks coming after a TikTok satirist after he had made satirical comments regarding the now suspended police minister. Back to the conversation now. And of course, these are officers that could have been better used, some would argue, on
Absolutely.
other cases at that very exact moment, especially in a country like ours with such high levels of violent crime. Let's go back to the police station. Anton reluctantly hands over his phone, but then after he sort of finds out why he's being investigated and the questioning starts happening, I thought it quite revealing. He found that the police there to be sort of quite embarrassed or sheepish.
Well, he said to me that at one point, one of the officers said to him, look, we kind of think this thing is really not something that we should be doing. And you seem like a good guy and et cetera, et cetera. And he said that they seem to be quite embarrassed about the whole thing. I mean, there's this scene that he describes where they essentially want him to play them the video and then they all sit there and watch it together. I mean, it would be funny if we were in some, Scandinavian type scenario with no crime, but of course we're not. And the fact that these resources were devoted to tracking down an influencer and making him watch his own video about the police minister. There's of course the tragic comic element to all of this.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, both sides of the coin, right? What did Minister Mchunu tell you in your initial reporting and bringing this story to light? He just wasn't happy with how he saw his sort of character being portrayed. He thought Anton was a journalist,
Yes.
and I thought quite revealing of what he told you was I couldn't leave it there. Other people might come along and question me about this TikTok video, said the minister.
Yeah, I think, I think many things can be true at the same time. I think he remains very sensitive about the Mchunu allegations. Of course, he vehemently denies that he has ever been implicated in any kind of criminal syndicate. And of course, the Madlanga Commission will have to investigate that. But his version of events was that, if I don't come out and do something about this, people might potentially think that this is true, that, people will ask me and these guys, this person is saying that you got a BMW, that you got 3 sex workers. How could you just leave it there? And he said that he had been sent the video by someone else. He doesn't name that person, who said, no, you have to do something about this. And that was what had informed his action. And he also interposed that sort of reputational harm with, the personal dimensions of it, that, I'm a married man, that I'm a man. To be associated with sex workers is a very damaging thing because men do these kind of things. And I didn't want that kind of implication on my name. And I've got kids and my kids were asking me about it. But I did say to him, the accusation that you're going to face is that you're criminalizing your own hurt feelings, and that this is not the appropriate legal step to take. You could take him to court for defamation, or you could, use various other mechanisms, but laying criminal charges in this context is going to be seen as potentially abusive and in a potential attempt to intimidate people, including Anton Taylor, from making content about you. And he said he vehemently denied this. But I mean, it was quite interesting to me because it was one of those things where it was a generational issue. I wondered if a sort of Ronald Lamula or much younger minister would make that kind of decision, because I think that there was an absence, arguably, for Senzo Mchunu of social media and how it works. And there was this classic moment where he said to me, well, what would you do if someone said these things about you? And I said, well, with the greatest respect, sir, if you saw some of the stuff that was said about me on social media, if I had to go and lay criminal charges, I would be permanently in the Rosebank police station in Johannesburg because, the stuff that gets said about me is terrible. But this is the cut and thrust of political life. And that might be a criticism of you, is that you just simply don't understand that this is the social media environment and you need to make your peace with it.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, to be a fly on the wall with that conversation with the minister, Karen. I just want to say this, basically from my point of view, is that if a police minister, suspended or no, somebody who's very high up in government is simply opening a case, do you not think that the employees that fall under that police minister's department would not want to take that particular case very seriously? So he took that route. And so we're now sitting in a position now where we can say, is this police abuse of power. Whereas, as you say, he could have gone the defamatory route, but he didn't. He chose to open a case, and he might claim, well, it's every individual's right, but it still came from a man who's high up in government, and you can't change that.
I think that's a pivotal point. Of course, Senzo Mchunu fundamentally denying abuse of power, saying, look, I could not dictate to the Hawks what they did with this case. I respect and understand that the NPA has declined to prosecute Taylor for alleged violations of the cybercrimes legislation. I respect that. But, I had no control over any of this. But you make a salient point. If the police minister is laying charges, obviously that is going to be taken a lot more seriously than if you and I wander into police station and complain about someone posting an offensive social media video about us. Those particular matters are going to be treated very, very differently. And I think the resource allocation is very telling here. We know that there was a triangulation report. We know there was data analysis. We know that the phone was taken away for 2 weeks and scoured by the authorities, and Anton Taylor's contacts were searched with Truecaller. That is evident. We know that 2 senior police officials came from Pretoria to conduct this investigation, not once but twice. So, all of those things create an impression of a serious effort being made, again, in the context of a country where serious effort is not made in a number of very serious offenses. And I think that is an incredibly big question mark. And I was reminded of that excellent podcast you did with our colleague Jan Khaber about the allocation of resources in the police budget to protection of so-called VIP police ministers, the president, former presidents. And I think that the figure that Jan quoted was something like 300 million rand less being given to the Hawks to investigate, corruption and crime involving those very same police, the senior, not police, but senior government officials. And that sense that the country is constantly being inundated with, that the police are essentially being employed more and more to protect high-ranking government officials. And, this case would be seen as a manifestation of that, rather than investing time and energy in addressing the corruption that they may be implicated in and protecting ordinary citizens such as yourself, myself, and the average man on the street.
What are the Hawks saying at this stage? It didn't go to the NPA, declined to prosecute. It's got no, real successful prospects here. What are the Hawks saying? Hey, we did what we needed to do. We're fine with that, Karen.
Well, there's adamant that there was merit to this case. They say they don't investigate cases that do not have merit to them. They're denying that there was any kind of influence behind the decision to investigate this by the Crimes Against the State unit. They're saying that the cybercrimes, division typically, that would fall within their ambit. But, there are going to be big question marks over that, because crimes against the state is really supposed to be stuff that's extremely serious. It's sedition, it's high treason, it's Burmach type trials. It's investigating people allegedly linked to ISIS, and so the allocation of this case to that unit is going to continue to be a big question. And the police's, the parliamentary committee has already written to the justice minister and other officials to try and understand what informed that particular decision. And of course, the Hawks is yet not responding to questions about who made that call. And how that decision was taken in circumstances where you would want full transparency about, how high-ranking police officials' complaints are dealt with. And as yet, we don't have answers about that one.
A very interesting case, and when we look at all the sort of like nitty-gritties of it, what it all sort of comes down to is the big question of, and to end off, are satirists, comedians, journalists, Extension, et al., cartoonists, Sapiro, many of us, are we safe in this country if we say something about, a certain minister? Are we going to get officers knocking on our door, even if we're not in the country and we have to hand over our cell phone very reluctantly? Taylor, I thought so interestingly, has said, hey, I'm not going to stop making videos. If anything, I'm going to start making more.
I mean, we have had this pathology before. I mean, the former president, Jacob Zuma, was very well known at one stage for launching defamation actions, none of which, including against Sapiro at one stage, none of which got under the ground. Of course, there were major protests over that artwork, the spear, huge pressure on the Goodman Gallery. So this is a tussle that we face in a constitutional democracy all the time. We have also seen a number of ANC officials, including Fikile Mbalula, Gwede Mantashe, go to court successfully, against what they construe as defamation. Of course, Fikile Mbalula's case particularly interesting because it concerned Anela Mda's allegations about his alleged role in the murder of one of his friends whose killers were found and ultimately convicted, but the masterminds of that hit as yet not discovered, and him going to court to essentially gag her from making social media claims about reporting, that pre-existing reporting about his links to the alleged taxi pass assassin of his friend. And of course he said, look, I have the right to defend myself, and with the Madlanga Commission coming up, I didn't want to be cast in the net of Mchunu's allegations, and so I went to court to defend myself. So this is a tension that exists within our society. The right to freedom of expression also has to be weighed against the right of every person to their own dignity and to not be falsely accused of things that they did not do. But I think that Nicole Fritz is correct when she says, as the Center for Freedom of Expression has advocated for, politicians must understand that within the position that they occupy, they are going to be criticized, and that there needs to be an awareness that you might not always like what people are going to say about you, but you need to understand that within the position that you occupy, just as we as journalists understand, you are going to face attack, criticism, and a lot of abuse and insult. And you need to be okay with that unless it goes over into lines that constitute a criminal threat or an incitement to violence against you. And I think that that's the tension that we are going to be exploring for some time to come. And I think that it's essential that in that context, the Hawks are open and transparent about what their informed decisions in this case, and the certainty that satire does not translate into criminal sanction or investigation or invasive raids in circumstances where it is self-evidently meant to be satirical and humorous content.
Well, Karen, I think it's no coincidence that the stories you cover end up being national talking points, whether or not it's Anela Mdoda and the big question about whether or not women are safe in Ubers these days, or if it's a comedian / satirist on TikTok being targeted by the police. You're always bringing these exclusives to the fore. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the flesh at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry once that date is announced. Karen Warren, specialist legal journalist at News 24. Thank you so much for your time on The Lead.
Thank you, Graham. It's a pleasure as always.
Trending topic.
To our trending topic now, and it's meant to be the ANC's second biggest province when it comes to support, but party membership in the Eastern Cape has dropped to below 100,000, according to the ANC's provincial chairperson, Oscar Mabuyane. He revealed this week that at least 300 of their local branches are not currently in quote-unquote good standing, meaning otherwise that the membership numbers of each branch have been fluctuating far too much for the party's liking. Yet at one point, the Eastern Cape had enjoyed a healthy 130,000 strong membership. Nonetheless, in 2024, the ANC had clinched 62.3% of the province's vote, the second highest in the country. Mabuyane, of course, who's also the premier, claims his administration has a good story to tell in its more recent infrastructure projects and apparently clinched some 6 clean audits for local councils. Still, he's frank that looking at next year's municipal polls, the ANC will have to consider future coalition partners if it comes to it. Losing some 5 million voters in the previous national elections, Mabuyane says means that they're now fighting for the soul of the ANC as we know it. Any thoughts? Drop us a voice note 072 562 3179. Do you buy what Mabuyane is selling?
This is Bruce Whitfield's Business Week. It's powered by Capitec, the business bank for everyone. It's business without the boring bits. Each week we share with you just what you need to know to help you understand and better navigate a deeply complex, a really confusing and uncertain world. A weekly wrap of the most important stories from the world of business, money and finance on News 24.
And finally,
And finally, he could face up to a decade behind bars. One of Norway's non-royal family members is set to go on trial for rape this coming February. Marius Høiby is the son of the crown princess Mette Marit from a previous marriage. With his notorious slicked back blonde hair, was charged earlier this year with 4 counts of rape and numerous other crimes, some cases of which are said to be related to his past relationships. The 28-year-old was in fact arrested last August for violence that he had admitted to perpetrating against his previous girlfriend, though Høiby later claimed to be suffering from substance abuse problems.
Looking for a smarter weekend scroll? The Weekender is your ultimate guide to bold stories, sharp opinion, and a fresh lens on life in Mzansi. From exclusive interviews and powerful essays to wine picks, playlists, and pop culture gems, it's your perfect weekend read all in one place, landing every Saturday on News 24.
This is The Lead, and this is the South African story. Relations between South Africa and the United States of America became strained by South Africa's announcement that it was going to normalize diplomatic ties with Iraq. South Africa established full diplomatic ties with Iraq in August 1998. The relations were concluded during November of that year by means of an exchange of notes through the respective missions. Well, according to our News 24 Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Ahmed Arif, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. I wonder where you got that quote from. Anything to add to any of these conversations you've heard in this edition of The Lead, you can send us your voice notes on 072 562 3179. My name's Graham Robenheimer. So long as there's trusted news first, we'll have The Lead.